Peter Mcguire, CEO of XM Australia. Kick us off this morning, Peter, with what you think OPEC need to agree at this meeting on December 1st in order to get an average price of $75 a barrel, the number we're sitting on now. In order for that to be the average price for Brent in the first quarter, what do you think they need to agree to do at their meeting at the end of this week?
Well, Sean, and good morning and greetings from Sydney to everyone. What we've seen the last couple of weeks has been quite dynamic as far as geopolitical concerns rolled into it. I think they're very much the status quo. Are they going to keep these cuts, Sean? And what is the fabric of the argument that OPEC are putting forward? And I think they've got to look at, with so many components of this, with the likes of the Russia situation seems to be gaining momentum as far as Ukraine and, the fabric, all of that rolling across as OPEC. Are we going to see a continuation of prices holding steady at this? We've also got a very volatile US dollar post President Trump being elected, and that's had a very, very solid uptick as far as US dollar index over the last couple of weeks, breaking 107 and now back under 107 in Asia trade today. So I would think to keep the status quo, Sean, but the variables that go into this equation are geopolitical concerns, and is this going to escalate tremendously in December and possibly Q1? And then what happens as far as US dollar and Fed policy, and of course ECB with structural weakness in the Eurozone, and it seems to be galloping away, the US stock market. And growth is relatively good, but they're still worried about the inflation story. So I think OPEC have got their hands full, Sean. They may have to just take a little bit of a backward seat and be happy at 75 because they may shoot to the upside. But I think there's just so many different variables that go into this whole equation as far as global economic situation.
Peter, looking again at our friends in China, your next door neighbors, the sort of anchor to this oil market. Today, we had a China central bank announcing an injection of $124 billion into the banking system. Another sort of part of this step-by-step drip feed stimulus. Your thoughts on this move and its sort of dot connecting with other previous stimulus moves? Does it have an impact? Will there be more of this as we get into the new year?
I'm interested to see the Asian equities today. Everything else is green, and some of the markets are up extraordinarily, very, very strong. And the only market that's down is China. So that just shows us. So yes, I would say that as far as stimulus is concerned, there'll be much more that needs to be delivered come January and February in Q1, and naturally where President Trump plays on that as far as tariffs and so on. So the internal engine of China needs to be very much engaged, and whether they're able to achieve that, Sean, it's just a time and tell sort of principle. We're just sitting here and we've just got to wait for it to unfold. They've had a very strong run up as far as Chinese equities in the last couple of months. So market sentiment has been relatively strong. You've just got to wait and see again, where we're going as far as GDP, what happens with the overall theme across China, and whether the world returns to really that, insatiable appetite for finished commodities, and whether there's, everyone wants to, stimulate their own economies and basically, infrastructure and build and buying Chinese finished steel and goods across the world. But at the moment,
do you think they're holding back any of their powder in terms of the waiting for the Trump actual, not the sort of the rumor or the fairly robust language, but actually see what the policy is and then have some stimulus left in the tank, so to speak? Yeah. Is there any expectation around that?
I think so, Sean. Delayed firepower, certainly, because they're not going to come out of the blocks and just, throw it all on the table now. This needs to be a drip feed. They need to, it's their brinkmanship here. There's a lot of, again, if you're looking at central bank buying, their appetite for gold has been extraordinary. And I think it's 37 straight quarters of, record amounts. So there's the first part. The second part is as 25 wears on, next year is going to be very interesting from a Trump perspective. And should there be, well, the World War III start to, rattle its cages a little bit, what happens to China and where does it align itself naturally with the likes of Russia? It's going to be very interesting how that plays. So from a geopolitical standpoint, I think China's sitting on its hands. It's watching everything roll. And yeah, they've got much more firepower if they need to really throw it. But you can't get away from debt to GDP at about 366%.
Peter, I wanted to take the opportunity to slightly put you on the spot, but nonetheless appreciate you're not a geopolitical analyst, but you are a very, a very alert Australian, and I wanted to get your views on your government recently took a step that I thought was rather unusual, and it plays into the wider geopolitical narrative that we're facing here in the Middle East, and that was Australia backed the UN resolution of recognizing the permanent sovereignty of Palestinians, which is a fairly significant departure. You would expect that move was obviously made by a lot of other countries, but Australia, which typically walks hand in hand with Washington on such matters, has departed. Any insights you could share on that for us? How should we read that?
I think, Sean, first off, if you look at the demographic of Australia, 26 million people, and it's a young nation. It's a young nation, and and Michelle would probably be able to add a little bit of this as far as being a fellow Australian. The first part is that our population boomed in the last probably 40 years or 50 years. And when I was at school, at one stage there, I think we were lucky to break 10 million. We're now at 26 million. And naturally, a lot of those are migrants. And a big percentage, we've got a large Lebanese Christian and Muslim population. We've got a large Palestinian population. And I actually live in an apartment complex at good old Coogee Beach, Sean, and the gentleman that lives directly underneath me is a Palestinian. So, and his mother and sister are in a camp there. So they are very much a fabric of our society. And I feel as though from a humanitarian side, there was a groundswell of quite probably and quite possibly a backbench and then across caucus and across government itself, that it permeated all the aisles of power to say, or corridors of power, that maybe we should look at a support of Palestine. And it just seems to be very much along with, I think, the general consensus in Main Street of what people are feeling. So I'm not here to, I'm here sitting in the middle of the fence, Sean.
Yeah.
There's no doubt that there is a very large proportion of our population has very dear sentiment towards the Palestinians.
Well, looking at that sort of through the other direction, Peter, that would be obviously this decision coming on the eve of Donald Trump coming into power, who's typically quite hawkish and aligned with Netanyahu. What would the current government of Australia's political alignment be, or how will that sit together with the sort of Republican and the far right element of the Republican Party, this Australian government? Because obviously these are key security allies in Asia.
Absolutely. Well, I do know that President Trump, or President-elect Trump, has been meeting with world leaders in the last couple of weeks, and it's been a revolving door with how many he's met with. And I'm not sure whether he's met with our Australian counterpart or our people, but I'm fairly sure that that would happen very, very shortly because of the relationship that Australia has demographically, and of course with the US being our big brother. It's always been told that they'll look after us. Whether that's going to happen or whether that's evaporated, I'm not sure. But it was very much a part of the US went to war, we went to war, and we followed the US, and that was they came to our savior in the sense of the Japanese invading through New Guinea, and what they did as far as, we all understand what happened in Japan. So
yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting step in the context of Australia. I mean, it's hard to read into too deeply right now, But I noticed that Kevin Rudd was busy deleting all sorts of former commentary from his Twitter or social media feed as the ambassador, Australian ambassador to the Washington. Thank you so much. We'll wrap it up there. Peter Mcguire, CEO, XM Australia. Really great to have you jumping in this morning. Thank you, Peter.